January 26th, the day of Finalized in America, tells itself stories. Stories of freedom, of opportunity, of justice for all. We build monuments to these ideals. We celebrate them. But what about the days when our actions wrote a different story entirely? A story that ran counter to our deepest promises? What about the days when we didn't just make a mistake, but institutionalized a contradiction? January 26th. It doesn't ring with the immediate recognition of July 4th or December, but it should, because on this date, scattered across our history, the United States made a series of profound choices that didn't just violate its principles. They built systems that actively worked against them. This isn't a story of accidents or bad luck. This is a story of active contradiction, of creating, on the very same day, the dream and the machinery that would dismantle it. Today, we examine January 26th. In 1863, we mobilized a technology of unity that would become a weapon of division. In 1950, we perfected a symbol of prosperity that would become an engine of inequality. In 1979, we chose a foreign policy path that would trap us in endless conflict. And woven through it all, from the very first January 26th in 1838, is the original, foundational contradiction, the act of removing people to make room for our own dream. This is the story of America building its future, and building the flaws that would haunt that future, all on the same day that the foundational contradiction. 1838, the original sin. January 26th, 1838, the trail of tears. To understand the pattern of January 26th, we must begin at the root, not with a law about trains or houses, but with a people. By 1838, the state of Georgia and the federal government, spurred by gold discovery and insatiable land hunger, had spent years systematically dismantling Cherokee sovereignty. They nullified Cherokee laws, looted property, and ultimately, after the fraudulent Treaty of New Echota, ordered their forced removal, the military operation to round up over 16,000 Cherokee men, women, and children began in the summer of 1838. But the bureaucratic, legal, and moral culmination of this atrocity, the moment it became the irreversible, official policy of the American state, has a specific heartbeat. That on January 26, 1838, the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps finalized its logistics for the spring removal. It was the day the machinery of state shifted from planning deportation to implementing it. It was the administrative point of no return. The contradiction here is absolute. The same government founded on the principle that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed was, on this day, meticulously planning the expulsion of a governed people who had not consented. We were building a continental nation on the premise of liberty, using the tool of genocide. This January 26th establishes the template. American progress defined by American dispossession. The dream built on a nightmare. And this template, this willingness to sacrifice one people's reality for another's ambition, would echo in the choices made on future January 26 THS. Contradiction 1. The machine of division, the railroad's double edge. January 26, 1863. January 26, 1863. America is tearing itself apart in the Civil War. And yet, in the midst of this bloody struggle to preserve the Union, Congress and President Lincoln make a monumental decision for the future. They sign the charter for the Union Pacific Railroad. This was the eastern half of the Transcontinental Railroad. It was sold as the ultimate tool of unity. It would bind the continent, heal the wounds of war, create one market, one people, from sea to shining sea. And in many ways, it did, but woven into the charter signed that day were the seeds of devastating division. The Union Pacific and its western counterpart, the Central Pacific, were granted something unprecedented: millions of acres of public land and government bonds for every mile of track laid. This created a perverse incentive. Profit came from laying track fast and claiming land, not from building the best, most sensible route. It sparked history's first great corporate lobbying frenzies, the Credit Mobilier scandal, a direct theft from the American public. It turned the railroad barons into the nation's first modern oligarchs at the human and ecological cost. And whose land was this public domain? The land of the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Pawnee, nations who had been promised these territories by treaty. The railroad was the spearhead for their final conquest. The buffalo herds were slaughtered to feed railroad workers and clear the way. The ecosystems of the Great Plains were shattered. On January 26, 1863, America created a machine of physical unity that became an engine of profound social and economic division. It unified a white, commercial nation by dividing it from the land itself and the people who belonged to it. The Contradiction, a tool for binding a country together, funded by and accelerating its greatest thefts and corruptions. Contradiction 2, the box of inequality. The Suburban Trap, January 26, 1950 Post-War America. The dream is tangible. A home of your own, a car, stability. And on January 26, 1950, that dream received its official architectural blueprint. On this date, the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, officially published and distributed its seminal Underwriting Manual. This wasn't just a rulebook. It was the DNA of the American suburb. It standardized the mortgage, making homeownership possible for millions of returning GIs. But here was the poison in the foundation. The FHA's criteria for a stable, insurable neighborhood explicitly demanded racial homogeneity. It advocated for racial covenants and warned against inharmonious racial groups. It literally redlined entire Black and immigrant neighborhoods, deeming them unfit for loans. On the same day, America promised prosperity for all through homeownership. It codified the system that would deny that prosperity based on skin color. The suburban dream was, by federal design, a white dream that the contradiction solidifies. The result? The largest creation of wealth in human history, the American middle class, built on home equity, was funneled almost exclusively to white families. Meanwhile, Black Americans and other minorities were locked out. Their communities starved of investment, creating a wealth gap so vast we have not closed it to this day. The January 26, 1950 Contradiction, a policy meant to create shared opportunity, became the primary architect of systemic racial inequality. We build a nation of homeowners by first deciding who could not be one. Contradiction 3, the well of endless conflict. The Faustian Bargain, January 26, 1979. January 26, 1979. The Cold War is in a tense phase. Iran, a key U.S. ally under the Shah, is collapsing into revolution. America is desperate for stability in the oil-rich, strategically vital Middle East. On this day, with revolution raging in Tehran, the U.S. State Department and intelligence community made a fateful, desperate pivot. They began formalizing covert outreach and support to a different group of anti-Soviet fighters halfway across the region, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. This was the operational acceleration of Carter's Cyrus Vance Directive, which had approved covert aid. January 26th marks the day the pipeline of money, weapons, and CIA training began to flow in earnest from concept to reality. The goal was straightforward: bleed the Soviet Union in a Vietnam-style quagmire of their own. The law of unintended. The contradiction here is one of catastrophic myopia. In fighting a Cold War enemy with the tool of asymmetric warfare, America empowered the ideology of militant anti-Western Islamism. We funded, armed, and trained the very men whose ideological descendants would become Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and the global jihadist movement. On January 26, 1979, America chose a short-term tactical victory over a long-term strategic disaster. We won the battle for Afghanistan's mountains and lost the peace for a generation. The tool we built to fight one empire became the weapon that would later haunt our own. The contradiction, a policy meant to secure America by defeating a rival, ended up undermining American security for decades. We opened a well of conflict on this day, and we are still trying to climb out of it. Conclusion. The January 26th contacts for January 20th. A removal, a railroad, a manual, a memo. 1838. Unity through dispossession. 1863. Connection through division. 1950. Prosperity through exclusion. 1979. Security through instability. The pattern is not mere hypocrisy. It's more profound, more systemic. It is the paradox of instrumental contradiction, the repeated belief that a noble end, unity, prosperity, security, could be achieved by a means that fundamentally violated that end. America, on these January 26 THS, looked at its ideals, then looked at the hard, real-world obstacles to those ideals, and chose to build machines that could tunnel through the obstacles, even if the tunneling itself violated the ideal. We chose progress over principle, hoping the principle would catch up later. But principles don't catch up. They get buried in the foundations. The shortcut becomes the permanent road. The temporary, brutal tool becomes the defining system. The Cherokee removal paved the mental path for the land grants. The land grants created the wealth that needed the FHA's racial walls to protect it. The Cold War mentality that saw people as pawns led us to the Afghan, final page to so. The question January 26 forces us to ask is not, did we make mistakes? The question is, what contradictions are we building into our systems today? What noble goal are we pursuing with a tool that will inevitably undermine it? Are we building a digital public square that fractures the public? Are we pursuing economic growth with mechanisms that ensure inequality? Are we seeking safety with technologies that destroy privacy? History's warning from these 4 January 26th is this: be terrified of the efficient solution that asks you to forget your principle. The day you do that is the day you stop building a better future and start building a future that will forever have to solve the problems you built into it. What modern January 26th contradiction do you see taking shape right now? Name it in the comments, because seeing the pattern is the first step to breaking it. If this journey into the heart of our national paradox resonated, please help others see it too. Like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for thinking deeply.